Battles and conflicts throughout history sometimes leave more than destruction, along with broken bodies and broken minds. The following 3 stories are about battles that left their impression throughout history, where over many years, frightened and dismayed witnesses saw them replayed again and again. The Cavalier. The following story happened in 1978 when Nigel Sweet was attending Malvern College in Malvern, Worcestershire, UK. At the time, Mr. Sweet was 13 years old and was a student at the boarding school, and what he witnessed frightened him so much that the ghostly scenario remains with him to this day. His story begins at 8 p.m. in the evening, where it was a clear and cold night. At the time, they were walking back into the main building to have their nightly bath. Just as it got out of the bath and was drying himself, one of the students yelled out, "Hey, there's someone on our cricket pitch." The cricket pitch was situated on the far side of the main sports field. Another student said, "Let's go and see who it is." 3 students, including Nigel, who was reluctant, then left the main building in search of the intruder. They had a small torch and slowly made their way to the location. As they approached the site, they came upon something that left all the boys paralysed with fear. They saw a man kneeling beside a white horse, and his head was bowed and in his hands. His shape seemed to shimmer an eerie gold colour, and he was dressed in clothing that looked like he was a Cavalier from the English Civil War. The boys were just a few metres from the figure, and for what appeared to be a few minutes, just gazed at this spectral image. They then slowly drew closer to the figure, where he suddenly turned his head and glared at them. All the boys immediately ran away, but Nigel was glued to the spot, just staring. The man's eyes were sad, and then a smile appeared on his face. Then he bent down and picked up his wide-brimmed hat, placed it on his head, and walked away, while his horse followed behind him. The Cavalier had only walked a few steps, then suddenly vanished. Nigel then walked over to where the man and the horse had been standing, looking for signs such as hoof marks, or anything that showed a man had been standing on that spot, but there was nothing. He never saw the figure again. On further research, he found that on the site where the school grounds now stood, there had been several confrontations between Oliver Cromwell's soldiers and the King's army during the English Civil War in the mid-17th century. It appears that the Cavalier had probably lost his life on the very spot where the cricket pitch now stood. But it could not have been a residual haunting, because the Cavalier had noticed the boys, so he was either a ghost or they'd been caught in a time slip. The Tower. The following incident happened in 1951 at Cuillin Hills, Dunster, in Somerset, southwest England. Joyce Nichols and Francis Robinson were on holiday in Dunster and decided to climb up the hill, which was quite steep. At the top of the hill was a tower that was built around 1760, and they decided to climb the tower. When they first started walking, the day was warm and sunny, but the moment they reached the top of the tower, the atmosphere completely changed, where it became cold and dark, as if they'd suddenly been plunged back into winter. The silence was then shattered by what appeared to be the sound of soldiers marching towards them. The strangest thing was that they could hear the army marching but could not see them. It suddenly dawned on them that they were quite possibly hearing a ghost army approaching, yet this army was approaching them while they were at the top of the tower and were coming straight at them. As the army drew closer and closer, they panicked and in a mad rush ran from the tower, injuring themselves in the process as they were fleeing. Joyce and Francis never did find out who the army could have been, but 20 miles away there'd been a major battle during the English Civil War called the Battle of Sedgemoor that took place on the 5th of July 1685. Since that date, people claim to have heard the sounds of a battle as if it was being reenacted. There have also been ghost sightings of tired and defeated soldiers. Dunster Castle was occupied by both sides during the English Civil War, where it appears that the sounds of war had reached the tower, terrifying Joyce Nichols and Francis Robinson. The Spectral Highlanders. In November 1956, in the Cuillin Hills south of the island of Skye in Scotland, 2 Oxford geology students, Peter Zinoviev and Patrick Skipwich, were camping. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, Peter was awoken by some strange noises and peeped out of the tent to see where the noises were coming from. To his utter amazement, he observed a large number of kilted Highlanders charging across the open ground. He quickly awoke Patrick, who verified the army of kilted soldiers, and both were terrified at what they were seeing. The following day, they moved their tent further up the hill and deliberately stayed awake to try and capture an enactment of the spectral army that they'd seen the previous night, but nothing happened and they went to sleep. However, at 4 a.m, they were awakened by the same sounds of the previous night, and as they looked out of their tent, they saw the Scottish Highlanders stumbling across the mountainside, as if in retreat, as they were totally bedraggled and half dead. The following morning, they approached a man called Ian Campbell at the Slegargan Hotel on the coast near Loch Slegargan. He said to the young men that they were not the first to experience such strange happenings and believed that what they'd witnessed were ghost soldiers or residual hauntings from either the 13th century or most likely soldiers from the 1745 Jacobite Rebellion. The rebellion was led by Bonnie Prince Charlie to restore the Stuarts to the Scottish throne, but unfortunately he lost the battle and was forced to escape over the sea to Skye, where the famous 19th century Scottish song was written.